I remember when being limited to 3 was just a nerf Thunder Dragons and Invoker quick scheme, but these days it's a legitimate testament to a card's power. Mostly trap cards it seems, but we're going over the best of the best. The top 10 limited to 3 cards in the game. I haven't done a top 10 in a hot minute, so this should be fun, fellas. What Battle Boxer Veil has over other Limit 3s belonging to an archetype is that he's more of a staple than anything. In the same vein that Kiteroid is part of an archetype, a really bad one at that. But the point is, Veil is a solid card. Level 4 Fire Warrior, when you take battle damage, you can special summon Veil from your hand and just regain the life points that you lost. Battle-centered hand traps have always been good in Duel Links, and at a certain point, Veil was debatably the best. His effect has a multi-purpose in Duel Links. Of course, he's saving your ass, but it also allows skills to be procced without actually losing the life points, like Destiny Draw or Master of Rights. Funny enough, this card was emergency limited when it first came out because it was honestly that problematic with another card on this list. However, another great thing about him is that he'd become a level 4 material on your field for the following turn, setting up a Malevolent Sin or anything that can get you back in the game, especially if you procced a draw skill. But these days, it's just not as useful. For starters, the game got a lot more swole, as I've pointed out. And if you take a shot from full armor or a finishing move Goki, then Veil is just never gonna activate because you're not regaining life points past 0. Should he still be limited to 3? In terms of strength, but for the time being, in my opinion, I don't think anyone is losing sleep with this card being limited. Slows down stall shenanigans to an extent, but overall, I think his time is coming soon. Maybe not in any deck list, but definitely in a Muay Thai regional championship, throwing elbows that one-shot every side man that showed up to the venue to clap. There's only a few archetypal cards on this list, Veil is one of them, but we're getting very pure this time because Salaman Great Circle is one of the best Limit 3 cards in the game, supplementing a deck that has been nothing but successful, affordable, powerful, and adorable. The word consistent is thrown around a lot, but completely defines Salaman Great, and Circle here is a big reason why. Quick Play spell has 2 effects with a hard once per turn shared between them. Either it adds a Salaman Great monster from deck to hand, or it targets a Salaman Great Link monster that was summoned using another copy of itself and makes it immune to monster effects except its own for the turn. Both effects are good, but it's definitely lopsided on which is better, because that searching effect is the dressing to the salad. That Black Truffle Ranch boy. You can search Mirror and instantly summon it, but more often than not, you're just trying to get that gazelle, the middleman to end all middlemen. And most salad combos fall apart without him. An integral part of now, honestly, one of the more successful decks in the game's history. Can it come off? I don't think so for now. Salaman Great running Ice Dragon's prison doesn't sound all that fun. It's a debate if Dark Contract with the Gate is better than Salaman Great Circle overall, but in my opinion this card is more detrimental to its locked up archetype. Limited to 3 alongside Swirl Slime, we also got Kepler at 2 and Savant Thomas at 1. And guess what? DDD still competes with this meta heavily, popping in and out of tier 3 despite the fact that it's one of the most restricted decks in the game. In my opinion, the unlimited DDD deck from last summer is one of the strongest decks in the game's history, and only wasn't tier 0 because it was competing with another one of the strongest decks in the game's history, Full Power Burning Abyss. That was the last time 2 decks were tier 1 at the same time. I'm not entirely certain on where DDD would be in this current meta unrestricted, but definitely tiered, and their longtime success can be heavily attributed to their excellent searcher, Dark Contract with the Gate. Continue a spell on a hard once per turn during your main phase, you can add a DD monster from deck to hand, and in classic DD style, it will inflict 1000 points of damage to you during your standby phase, which matters sometimes in this low life point format, especially if it's on the field for multiple turns, but whatever. It can search Savant Kepler, and Savant Kepler can search it, seamlessly and consistently setting up DDD alongside their skill. To call this card detrimental to this obviously powerful archetype is an understatement. Can it come off? Maybe not yet, or at least it's not the first card I'd take off to give DDD a buff. But oh, how DDD greedy players would love to have this card back at 3 copies, because the optimal ratio for now is 2 Dark Contract and 1 Swirl Slime, who can be an honorable mention or whatever melted ice cream looking ass. But it's fine, because the rest of the archetype is up in Planet Fitness, keeping the Lunk Alarm on deck. I've talked about Chaos Dragon Levianeer a lot, and it's for good reason, because this card is swole to say the very least. The most egregious example of Konami releasing a card too early, it was in the game months before Exceed monsters, if you can believe that. Banishes 3 light or dark monsters in any combination from your grave to summon him, and then activate one of his 3 effects depending on the materials you banished. If it was all light monsters, you can special summon a monster from your graveyard in defense mode. All dark monsters, you can randomly shuffle 1 card from your opponent's hand back to the deck, or, and best of all, banishing light and dark monsters allows Levianeer to destroy up to 2 cards on the field. His effect does not target. He can't attack the turn he uses any of his effects, and they all share a hard once per turn, but even those things don't reel this card in. Its summoning condition is really easy and can be accomplished in multiple decks. It can be a complete board wipe, and since it's level 8, it's often used as an extra deck material after resolving his effect anyway. So him not being able to attack after clearing the board is not an issue. Easy rank 8, link 2, maybe a level 9 synchro with Glow Up Bulb, or even a level 12 synchro with Raiden. But his biggest claim to fame was, and kinda still is, being the boss monster of Thunder Dragon. An archetype that loves to dump themselves in the graveyard, but love getting banished from the graveyard even more from Levy's effect. Paired together, you can be put in a winning game state almost instantly. And that is where this card's restriction comes from. Buddied up with Thunder Dragon Dark because apparently Konami has seen enough of those reptilians. So can Levianeer come off? Nah, probably not for now, especially with both of its searchers being limited to 3 now. Really doesn't seem like Konami has any intention of releasing this card anytime soon. But hey, that doesn't mean Dragon Dark can't come off, I'm just saying. Aleister the Invoker still stands as one of the stronger normal summons in the game, but he's higher up on this list for his future potential as well. The other egregious example of Konami releasing cards too early, at a certain point not too long ago, 4 of the 7 cards in this archetype were restricted in some way. If that isn't releasing a card too early, then I don't know what is. Cocytus is still the only banned archetypal card in the game. Level 4 Dark Spellcaster, when he's normal summoned, you can add an invocation from deck to hand. This is the archetypal fusion spell. Confusion summoned by using materials from the hand, but if you're summoning an invoked fusion monster, you can banish monsters from your field as materials or from either player's graveyard. The invoked fusions all require Aleister and then a specific attribute. So dark for Caliga, fire for Purgatrio as examples. This makes summoning the invoked fusions really easy. Purgatrio is by far the best legal one that we have, so Invoker is often paired with fire monsters and Duel Links. In fact, this synergy is why Battle and Boxer Vale got his limit 3 in an emergency ban list. Invocation can also shuffle itself from the graveyard back to the deck to add a banished Invoker to your hand that you will have if you fusion summoned with him. Just make sure you didn't use Aleister as a material from the hand. Then you can normal summon Aleister again on the next turn and then just search Invocation again. But Invoker himself also has an effect from the hand to discard himself and target a fusion monster you control. Gains 1,000 attack and defense until the end phase. And since you're guaranteed to get Invoker back in the hand after a fusion summon, it turns Purgatrio into a 3,000 plus attack piercing battle damage multi-attacking giga weapon, or made invoked Cocytus the most immovable wall in the game's history, putting him at 3,900 defense on top of his immunity to targeting and card destruction. Can Invoker come off? I got a video in the works about it, so we'll see. Neos Fusion may be an archetypal specific card, but like Veil really steps outside of that in its own Neos engine. This describes a deck that's using this card alongside Elemental Hero Brave Neos, and usually just 1 copy of Neos in the deck. Neos Fusion can, believe it or not, fusion summon a monster that has Neos as a material and only has 2 materials. You can use them from your hand, field, or deck. Also ignores summoning conditions. The downside is, for the rest of the turn you cannot special summon monsters. moves. But it isn't like Red Eye's Fusion where you're locked from special summons altogether for the turn if you use it. You can do all your combos and special summons first and then drop Neos Fusion. Brave Neos calls for Neos and any level 4 or lower effect monster, essentially turning Neos Fusion into a Foolish Burial for level 4 or lower effect monsters. That also happens to put a body on the field. What do you want in the grave? Bacon Saver, go for it. Harpy Harpist, go for it. Volcanic Shell in a Fire Reload Invoker deck, go for it. Yep, another card limited alongside Invoker. Though there are other reasons for this because that nerf to Invoker was actually the only unintentional one, but you know, still. Obviously, this card sees the most play in hero decks to this very second, and it's excellent in them because Fusion also has the effect to banish itself from the grave to prevent a Fusion monster with Neos as a material from being destroyed, or to prevent it from shuffling itself back to the extra deck. A motif for the Neos Fusion monsters, but not something that Brave Neos does, adding guaranteed protection to the free body that you just put on the field. Brave Neos himself is also limited to 2 to further neutralize this engine with other things, because sending any level 4 or lower effect monster of your choice to the graveyard is actually really strong. This card has future-proof potential as well and can stay limited to 3 for the time being, in my opinion. When I did a top 10 for trap cards in the game last summer, I put Floodgate Trap Hole at number 1. And at that time, before Link monsters and when Pendulum decks were popping off a lot more, that was debatably true. When your opponent summons a monster or monsters, Floodgate can flip them to face down defense position, where they cannot ever change their battle position, devastating to decks that rely heavily on a normal summon and that normal summon being used as an extra deck material, since you just can't do that with a face down monster except for fusion summoning. It can render boss monsters completely useless and, yeah, single-handedly win games against Pendulum decks that try to Pendulum summon 3 or even 4 monsters at once, and all of them will be flipped down permanently. And that is exactly why this card is nowhere near as good as it used to be. It cannot be used on Link monsters since they just literally can't exist in defense mode. However, it can still be used on Link materials. But sometimes it is better to disrupt your opponent's boss monster after they drained their resources. If you floodgate something too early, your opponent can work around it and still make their boss monster. It depends on the matchup and what we're talking about, but Floodgate does not have that choice against Link decks. It has to be used on the materials, limiting the versatility of the card, as I said, but it's still number 4 on this list. It can still devastate the opponent. It's still one of the most played traps in the game despite its ridiculous competition. So I'll give it to the man or to the crevice in the ground. It's a good card. Can it come off? I'm gonna go with no, mostly because I don't think anyone wants to see this card at 3 copies alongside some of the other Limit 3 powerhouse trap cards. And speaking of which, Compulse was clearly Konami's attempt at another Book of Moon, and while not as meta-defining and omnipresent as Book was in its glorious Book of Money days, it still became one of the best staples in the game overnight. Selection box exclusive for the time being, target a monster on the field, return it to the hand. Whereas Floodgate no longer gives you the choice against Link decks, Compulse gives you all the choices. Hell, you could bounce your own monster back to reuse an effect, though I've never seen that done, but you could. Removes extra deck materials from the field, sends extra deck monsters themselves straight to their room where we're waiting for dad to get home to talk. Everything and anything, I'll see ya. One of the best generic disruptions in the game was released with its Limit 3 because Konami knew, but again, like Floodgate, it does not stop this card from seeing a ton of play. I was having a hard time deciding which was better, Crackdown or Compulse, and I can definitely see the argument for Compulse being better, but Crackdown can be more devastating. Can target an opponent's monster and take control of it. It can't attack or activate its effects, and when it leaves the field, Crackdown is destroyed. Like Compulse, it has no restrictions on which victims it can take, but the reason I said Crackdown can be more devastating is because there's nothing stopping you from using that monster as a material of your own. You could exceed or link summon with it, potentially potentially fusion or synchro with it, or even in some cases, a rank up. So not only do you deny and interrupt your opponent, you can also go into your combos with an extra material on deck. This card is countered by MST, but honestly, all traps just sitting on the field before your opponent does anything are just a testament as to why MST is arguably the best card in the game. But Crackdown is devastating, really strong, and another selection box exclusive, except it's a selection super mini. So it's actually way more affordable than Compulse and number 1 on this list. Can it come off? No. Why? I mean, Compulse and Crackdown were strong additions, of course, but this? What were you thinking? Ice Dragon's Prison is now, easily in my opinion, the strongest trap card in the game. Targets an opponent's monster in the graveyard and special summons it to your field, negates its effects. Then, you can banish 2 monsters on the field with the same type as each other. It's a hard once per turn. This is just Treacherous Trap Hole on steroids. A card that is limited to 1. Not only does it not destroy monsters, it doesn't even target them. Pretty much nothing is safe from this card except for Ancient Gear, Howitzer, how you doing? This just does so many things at once. Acts like a DD Crow by removing a material from the graveyard like Jack Jaguar as an example, and of course interrupts and banishes one of their monsters on the field. Banishing while not targeting is just better than Compulse returning to the hand, better than Floodgate flipping down. The only issue is going against a deck with multiple different types, but that is actually extremely rare. All Mech Knights are Psychic, all Salads are Cybers, all Gokis are Warrior, all Infernoids and BAs are Fiends. And funny enough, Madolche is actually generally fine against this deck because they have a myriad of different types. Just bringing that up because I think it's kind of funny. But the thing is, its second effect to banish is actually optional. You don't have to. So at the very least, this card will steal an opponent's monster from the graveyard, which can definitely be useful against Madolche. Wins games by itself, I feel like its reign of terror has only just begun because it is another selection box exclusive, the new paywall card. And this one is just like why, man? This should have been a limited to 1 bundle card at the very worst. I respect its strength and gorgeous artwork, but I do not respect its attitude of coming to this game like he owns the joint. And soon enough, he will. So that's gonna do it for this video. I thank you guys for watching, and I will see you in my next one.